Welcome to the Bank Marketing Show, the podcast that engages and informs you for success in today's marketplace. It's the show that will make you a better marketer with trends, tactics, and inspiration from experts and industry leaders. If you're wanting to impact your personal success and position your bank as the best choice in your market, you're in the right place. Now let's dive into today's show with your hosts, Chris and Dan.
Hey there. Welcome to another episode of the Bank Marketing Show. I am, like I like to say, half of your host, Dan, and welcome, Chris.
Good to see you, Dan.
Likewise. Yeah, I know we've both been doing a bunch of traveling. How does it feel to be kind of at home or in the office, I should say?
I sort of am, and you asked me that as we're recording this, and I'm taking off tomorrow to, head to the next bankers conference. So, it's good. I love being out and about, Dan, and it's, of course, we get to connect and meet with and engage with clients and all that. We also do a lot with other vendors, and folks, and there's so many things that we do when we're out and about that are just give us a pulse of the industry. And what's happening in the industry with trends and impacts and those kinds of things. And
Yep.
I know that led you and I to say, hey, we've got a bunch of juicy stuff, even at this mid-year point, to pass along to our listeners. So I think that's a lot of what you and I wanted to check in with each other and share with folks today.
Yeah, I think we spent a lot of time on the show talking about details or talking to guests around a specific area. And yeah, I mean, I'm in the same boat of just, listening to, speakers talking at a higher level and at these conferences kind of seeing which sessions are well attended, right? Kind of gives me a sense of what banks are most interested in. And so I think it's being mid-year and everything's changing so quickly, it's worth kind of taking a little step back, right from the day to day. You can get lost in designs and Facebook ads and those types of things.
Right.
So just kind of taking a step back and thinking, well, what do we need to be doing now to be ready for these trends in the future?
Yeah. Well, Dan, one of the, I think maybe some of the value add we bring to our listeners, and we'll share about some more today, is that as executives for marketing agencies, you and I was at one for a core provider, conference for the Southeastern U.S. and then several state banking association ones. And then you just got back from one of the largest national, financial industry conferences that there is. And, so it's several different perspectives here. So I wanted to kind of dive in and ask you this, to kick it off today. What's kind of maybe the top headline or headline or two? What's kind of the big that you're seeing out there?
Yeah, I mean, a couple different things, right? I think, I think the hardest thing in this industry is like, there's so many different sizes of institutions, right? And then there's some institutions that only focus on loans and some that are more commercially focused and some that are, retail focused. So it's hard just reading news or reading industry kind of sources and really get a sense of everything that's going on.
Or podcasts. Listening to really great podcasts.
Well, no, I think listening to this podcast, you should know everything.
There you go.
No, but so I think what the biggest thing that struck me, right, is, and I went to the Financial Brand Forum conference out in Las Vegas a couple weeks ago, and the biggest thing was just it was all AI. Everything was AI. I'd say easily more than half the sessions were, had AI in the title, and probably the other half, had it as a big subsection of the presentation.
Yeah,
it was just all that, right? So if I had to pick one headline, it would be, AI, right? And that's been a headline for a year and a half. It's been everywhere, but the feelings around it, the stuff that people were talking about has started to change a little bit, started to mature. So it was interesting seeing that happening.
Well, Dan, so let me ask you this. Even as recently as a year ago, that conversation was probably the majority of our listeners were like, oh, yeah, well, I've heard of ChatGPT. Well, okay. Well, now AI is, that's like a very small portion of that. Now, AI is not future tense, but is integrated into just about everything in the world. I was visiting, for example, one of our podcast guests with Chris Moya, the CEO for ICBA New Mexico. And, he was talking about how his team and even lots of the other bank leadership that he's talking to, it's in Microsoft Office products. It's in everything. It's seamed into, just about everything that we're doing. And in the marketing world, it's in design platforms. Certainly, it's in content platforms. It's in, even digital ad targeting and all kinds of things. So, to kind of take it a little bit of a deeper level, Dan, what you're hearing out there around AI.
Yeah, I think the biggest things like I like to say last year was kind of the year of the chatbot, right? The buzz last year because ChatGPT was released early last year was generative AI, right? So ask it a question, it'll go out and it's trained on a bunch of information and it'll come back and give you an answer. And for financial tech and specifically, it was on the kind of the fall conference circuit in late 2023, right? It was all, hey, we've got this fintech platform and we've built a bot. Great. And the bot really just doesn't do much other than answers questions. And you can train it on stuff. And I think what's happening now is there's very specific solutions. Banks are starting to train their own version of ChatGPT on their own stuff. So there's some interesting case studies about, we put a bot up on our site. Last year, it would just sort of say, well, here are our hours, or here's our routing number, right? That's asking what the routing number is probably like 70% of the calls to most banks' call centers. And so they found, I put a bot up on the site that answers that and it reduces calls. Great. But now the bots can be trained on that bank's specific data. So it can answer product questions. It can answer, how do you do a wire transfer? And, ask questions back about, well, how big is the transfer? Oh, for that, you're going to need to come in. And they're starting to get a little bit more specific. And then one bank gave a case study around, they did that for customers, but then they kind of duplicated, they cloned their bot and made an internally facing bot. So even the wire transfer question, even internally, right? Some, people need to check the wire transfer rules when the question comes up.
Yeah.
And so now they, instead of going and finding the rules in on a intranet site or a big binder somewhere, they can ask their own internal bot. And so there's stuff like that. Things are starting to be a little bit more specialized. Right? I think that's the trend, or one trend, right? The other trend, the other big trend was, I think in the fall, it was a lot of sessions around what generative AI is. And this time around, it's more, how do we implement it? It's more, what can it do? What are the possibilities?
That's the AI as a partner headline, right? It is kind of the...
that's I think part of it, right? It's several different speakers talked about when ChatGPT first came out, there's a lot of buzz around, hey, this is going to replace people. And, there was some skepticism about that, right? It's not going to replace, but the theme was it's not going to replace people, but it's going to augment, right? Let you get more done. But starting to think of AI as a partner to help you versus a replacement, because especially in a heavily regulated industry, you can't leave everything up to AI. But can it get you further? Can it spit back those wire transfer rules and save you 15 minutes of finding it in a binder? And there still needs to be a human there to decipher what the rules are saying.
Which is a lot of how we're using it as agencies, as marketing agencies, by the way. Yeah. So
right. And we've said that on here too, of hey, great, use it to write that blog, but you can't publish it verbatim. Right. But it can get you from 0 to 80, and you need to take it from 80 to 100, and it's saving you time. It's not replacing you, but saving you time. And I think that was like the that was the undercurrent of it. Is almost think about AI as another employee, right?
Resource
Yeah,
generation, idea
and they're-
generation, fact
Yep.
finding at your
yeah,
fingertips.
and they're not
Yeah.
they're not infallible, right?
Yep.
They're not autonomous, but they sure can, assimilate a lot more information than a human can much faster. So
Yeah.
I think that was pretty interesting to hear that from the banks, right? I mean, I think I've seen reading tech industry news too, like that's been part of the discussion. I'm like, oh, ChatGPT is not really going to replace stuff, not for a while, right? I'm talking in the next 6 months, year, but to hear it from financial institutions that were there, starting to think of it that way, that was good to, because I think that's to me that's the first step. If we think of it as an employer or partner, it makes it easier to sort of for FIs to implement it. Versus if we're thinking of it as a replacement, there's going to be some hesitation and some fears and, compliance and risk aversion are going to come in. But if it's an employee, if you're thinking of it as an employee, like it makes it feel a lot more possible to envision, life with AI.
Yeah. Well, and a lot of what I heard, and hearing more in the realm also from like the whole core provider spectrum at that conference and some of those other things too, you and I mentioned before we started today too, is innovation from within. It's not just these big tech companies trying to shove AI down the throats of bankers and marketers. It's actually, now it's kind of sitting there on the table looking at us, and it's not quite as big and scary, and it's certainly not future tense like it was. I was going to say a year ago, but even 6 months ago. It doesn't feel future tense. It's kind of like, okay, it's in the room with us now. And then the kind of examples that you're talking about is even internal utilization and training and those types of things. So yeah, I think bankers, marketers, folks in our sectors and industry verticals are kind of going, okay, now I'm really starting to get some new ideas for how to utilize this well. It's not future tense. It's not scary. It's not going to, kidnap my kids or, take my job today. But it is evolving us. So, how are we going to innovate with it, from within? Maybe that is for better customer service. You mentioned a couple of good examples, but
and I think the extension of that too is it's some of the sessions where ChatGPT is one use case of AI. It's one, it's almost becoming this time last year, right? Early 2023, it was all of AI. I mean, AI has been around a while, but when you talked about AI, it was all ChatGPT.
Yep.
This time it's more, yes, ChatGPT is a big thing, but that's like generative AI. Now there's there's a lot more to AI than that. And I just hadn't seen that at in banking media or banking conferences before. But now there's more, right? It's AI when you think of AI as an employee, it's like, well, great. Well, an employee can be a blog writer, can be a researcher, but an employee also, does a lot of tasks. And so like AI as a doer, AI, automation through AI, decision-making or looking for growth opportunities, evaluating not just, your banking rules and spitting back an answer, but evaluating big data sets is a pretty interesting application as well. And I think there was starting to be some of that talk. And it was still kind of high level. It was less about like how to actually do it. And it was more of like that kind of what's starting to become possible for banks.
Yeah.
But it was new. It was new stuff from previous conferences.
Well, and I'll piggyback on some of that, Dan, because one of the questions you and I were talking about and asking each other too is, well, how is what we're hearing out there now differing from previous years? And want to hear your thoughts on that, but mine is, and one of the things that I'm hearing and seeing being out there amongst the industry is less of kind of the repetitive information year after year after year, with whether it's vanilla chocolate or strawberry, still kind of carrying forward a lot of the same information. Well, what's now is innovation, and is is, yes, mostly AI, but it just seems like things are evolving and changing more present tense. And tech innovation, AI is not all these future tense conversations that we've got to get ready or whatever. It's more, it's here, utilize it. How are we utilizing it? Or how are, and for a lot of those that we work with that are some of the under $1 billion, community banks and financial institutions, it's more, okay, we see, maybe the big nationals and the fintechs are ahead of us, but we're starting to really utilize it too, even at the community level in banking. So I think that's kind of and it's a different feel. It's a different kind of set of conversations.
Yeah.
So I think that's, for me, some of what is kind of some of the differing from prior years that you're sensing and hearing?
Yeah, it's a lot of that too. It's becoming something everybody should use in some form. And I think there will be more tools for smaller banks, right? As they go. And obviously, the conference I went to, the Financial Brand Forum, is like a huge national conference, couple thousand people. Like, it's a much different set of speakers and topics than, if you're going to like state level conferences than you'd see there. Not in a good or bad way, just different, right? So it's more like high level and bigger national speakers, right? So I think AI is just woven into the fabric of everything, right? Yeah. And as we get tools that do more, AI tools that are actually doing more, it becomes easier for smaller banks to implement. But I think it's the feeling was it's like sort of impossible to avoid it.
Yeah.
The other thing I'll say too, though, and I'm wondering if you felt some of this too at the state level, was AI itself, right? If we're talking about AI as an employer or partner, AI itself isn't necessarily going to make your bank innovative, right? It's not, you can't just say, great, we use ChatGPT to write our blogs, we're innovative. A few of the sessions I went to touched on, innovation really has to come from in the bank, has to come from back office improvements, not the front end. You can slap a chatbot on your website, but if all it does is spit back the routing number, it's not really innovative. It saves your customer service team some time. But if that's all a customer can do and they can't actually get things done, they can just answer questions and still have to call, or still have to come into the bank, still have to sign printed paper forms to apply for a loan. That's not innovation, and so you can put kind of AI tools on your front end, but if your back office processes are still outdated, if you're still on an old core, how much are you really innovating? And so there was some talks around the banks that feel most innovative are doing this from both ends too, right? Can we change our internal processes to adapt to the new world?
There you go. And you mentioned those processes, and so at some of those, what I'm seeing, and this is what kind of puts some of the smaller banks on equal playing field with it, is in the back room and in the C-suites is identifying the pain points. And this is an age-old business process, but it's identify the pain points and how can the utilization of these innovative tools resolve a pain point so that it actually begins to shift our brand because we are serving customers better or, faster or in more of a different way so they're not having to pick up the phone and call us, with things. And so it actually improves our value to our customer because it helps make their life easier because, they used to have to do X and now they can do Y and it's much easier. And our system, which by the way includes some type of AI tool, does this proactively. So it's those kinds of things, Dan, that I'm seeing and I'm glad to hear kind of the thinking about that. And it's just as much on the vendor side of things as it is from the bankers, and those in the industry, because I think a lot of times vendors feel responsible to create these not only tools, but systems, and then kind of go and say, hey, this is how this can really make a difference in how your customers portray you because it's solving something for them. Those types of things. And obviously your team, and whether it's frontline staff or loan officers or whoever it is, kind of fall on that spectrum as well, because it affects how they do their job in very positive ways. It's kind of like, hey, did you know we can kind of take care of that for you? Wow, really? And then there's so many examples, within, some simple things, in banking that can do that. So, the from mobile app stuff to all kinds of things. So that's a lot of, I think, how that's doing. And Dan, I'm wondering if you also heard some of this, and in a platform like Financial Brand, you might not have, but at the state level, a lot of what I'm hearing also are questions about, okay, all of this is happening. It's great. It's here. What about regulation? What about, what's happening there? And I'm hearing, and this is kind of even back here in the office and having conversations with leadership and a lot of our bank clients, kind of going, hey, man, we're having auditors in here and they're asking us questions that they've never asked us before. And in past years, it's, okay, well, we know the same set of questions is coming every time, right?
Yep.
And that's fine. So now it's kind of like, man, even the regulators are, I don't want to say they're scrambling, but they're even trying to figure out how to ask the right questions.
Yeah. I've been interesting, and this wasn't from a conference, but just a kind of client conversation recently that was, well, I mean, to give some context, I'm starting, started a new role with an AI, financial tech platform. And, we're talking to people about what we do. And it's essentially, predictive AI for marketing. And, we've got a tool that can automate a lot of kind of marketing decisions and next best offer and who to reach out to. And I'm not going into the whole sales pitch, but like the questions we're getting are right. Like, well, how are you determining who to reach out to? And from a compliance perspective, right? Because we want to make, is the AI, is it fair, right? Is it determining offers fairly? Is it determining,
or their privacy policies that need to be readdressed or whatever, right? Yeah.
Right. Well, and and most of these tools in our tool, like we don't use PII, right? So it's less a privacy thing and more just, are we determining it fairly? Is it somehow, is the AI somehow pulling in credit scores and race and gender information? It's not. Ours isn't. But you don't know that, right? And it's a fair question. But I think from a regulatory standpoint, what's interesting is like you don't always know. I mean, a lot of AI ML models don't, the way that they work is they're comparing, data across customers. They're comparing things that are not intuitive and it's not like we're feeding the AI tool a list of here's 20 factors to look at to see if somebody is, in market for this product. It's not that cut and dry. The reason it's AI, the reason it does it so quickly and so well is because it's looking at thousands of factors that we don't know human is programming in there. It's sort of just comparing records, looking at trends, looking at what happened in the past and making projections into the future. But the way the models work, and this isn't like ours, this is just most ML models. I mean, there's lots of different kinds of models, and I'm generalizing a lot here, but most ML models, you don't know the fact. It doesn't spit out a report of the factors. It doesn't say this customer should be offered this product because A, B, and C. It just says this customer should be offered this product. And you can create the model and have it be fair just from the standpoint of it doesn't know the gender. It doesn't know, it's looking at the data, not the person.
Right.
And, but from a regulatory standpoint, like the regulators, the auditors will need to catch up to this, but it's moving so fast. It's moving so much faster than government will keep up with.
Exactly.
And this isn't a problem just for fintech. It's across lots of industries. It's just moving so fast that we've got to figure out ways to answer those questions and say, well, maybe we can't answer the question directly, but we can say, look, here's the data that's loaded into it. It doesn't have gender. It doesn't have, race. It doesn't have any of the fair credit stuff in it. So it can't be using that to make decisions. And
Right,
I'm not
it's
a
more
regulator,
about-
but there's...
Yeah, it's more about spending trends or saving trends or
Yeah, it's like looking at transaction volumes and data flow or cash flows and those types of things.
Yeah. It's zeros and ones.
Yeah.
It's not segmenting by anything that would be a regulatory concern.
Right.
Yeah.
But we're going to have to explain that. And we as in fintechs and banks and marketing agencies, we're going to have to figure out how to answer those questions in a different way while the regulatory system adapts.
Yeah.
Sorry, down this rabbit hole, but it's really interesting because I think when we're starting to ask these regulatory questions, that just shows me like the industry's thinking about this a lot more in depth and going beyond ChatGPT, right? We made the point a minute ago of like ChatGPT is kind of one AI use case. But clearly if we're asking these types of regulatory questions, like we're thinking beyond that.
Yeah. Dan, flipping over from AI here for a moment, while in general we're talking about kind of mid-year trends and impacts and things that are happening out there in the industry. One of the biggest things that we're also seeing is I keep kind of hearing it called the rate pivot. Everybody in the industry knows that for years and years and years we had a low interest rate environment, and it just kind of it was more about trying to beat out my competitors across the street because they're at 2.7 and we're at 2.85 and all that kind of stuff. And then obviously all of that changed significantly. And 2023 saw that change significantly. And we even talked about it on this show that my team started doing so much marketing and promotion for our bank clients for CDs that prior to that, half my team had not seen that in years. Banks weren't promoting CDs and all of that. It was all on the loan side. So anyway, and so now what we're seeing is, it's interest rate environments are kind of getting from 8 trending toward the 5s and, this and that. And it's not just those rates, but it's shifting the marketing focus of so much of what our clients are doing, and we're seeing that happening faster. Whoa, we hit our CD income goals. We need to move over to this. Or, we were promoting loans for so long. Now, we got to shift back to deposit. And we're seeing it, that seesaw, Dan, move faster. And I'm sitting at lunch at these conferences with CEOs, hearing them have these conversations like, man, it's moving so much faster.
Well, no. And I mean, I think it's, one of the big things that AI will help with is, I don't know, I think there's, from a marketing standpoint, right, there has been this like ebb and flow of, are we doing deposits right now or loans and back and forth. But I think AI is going to make it a lot easier for a tool to look at what's right for that specific customer.
Yeah.
Because the consumers, an individual consumer does not shift from looking for a place for their deposits to loans, right? Like you're at a certain life stage or...
Exactly. Life. I was going to say a life event
and you get a bonus at work and you might start looking for a CD, right? Or, you just moved homes. And so you're not in the market for a mortgage, or you bought a home at 8% 2 years ago and now it's at 5 and you want to refi. Like that's an individual thing. And I think the where AI is going to start to help over the next couple years is look at, you can start looking at scale across, hundreds of thousands of customers as to like, what's the message they need right now versus what should the bank be marketing. So, and that's current customer stuff. At the high level, at customer acquisition level, there may still be some of those general kind of brand trends, but I think, I don't know, my on the customer acquisition side, my thoughts are, what's feeling different this time about kind of the shift back towards loans is because it's not, the rates aren't dropping back to 2 or 3 anytime soon.
Right.
And so it's not this like gold rush to go back to everything is loan all the time. It's more driven from a banks are cost cutting standpoint. Banks are saying, hey, we had a bad, I met with several banks that had kind of a bad quarter or two recently. And like, all right, it's time to trim some costs. We were throwing a bunch of marketing dollars trying to get deposits because it's hard to do, but now it's not worth that as much. And, we make a lot more money on loans. So let's kind of shift to that, but it's less like, it's just the energy is a little bit different.
Well, it's kind of like the quicker or shorter term need for portfolio balancing.
Yeah.
Is kind of happening faster.
Yeah.
Question mark? I that's what it seems to be, to me is that correctioning of that portfolio balancing. Right. And margins look very different to most banks right now than what they had, I don't know, certainly a couple of years ago and prior.
Yep. Right. Exactly. Like it seems like a similar shift on the marketing side, but it's coming from a different place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, Dan, I know a lot of what you and I wanted to do here today was share a lot of this information, and it's been kind of rolling in the back of my head as we've been talking on the episode today, is that I hope that this generates conversation by our listeners with others that they're working with or with others that they're networking with and going, hey, man, Chris and Dan really made me think about this. And Dan talked an awful lot about how, about AI and what that entire, again, it's not a future tense. It's that wave is here. It's actually, the wave is already rolled in. It's how are we innovating, using or not? And what do we need to be doing? And so I hope our conversation today is generating lots more conversations out there.
Yeah. Well, look, it's here, it's unavoidable, and it's just going to move faster and faster.
Yep.
And you can't avoid it. And so you've got to find a way to roll with it, innovate with it, and, incorporate it into your culture. So I hope from this conversation, we've inspired some thinking and, get you to start researching how banks are using AI, researching, tools that are out there and start thinking about ways to incorporate it. Because if you don't start now, it's just, as the AI kind of industry moves faster and faster, it's going to be harder and harder to catch up down the line.
Yeah. Well, and the good thing is the age-old methods of networking and, checking things out to see what others are doing and all of that can help you give internally applicable, ideas about how this can happen in your own institution and what we can be doing today and tomorrow. Correct. So, yeah.
Yep. Absolutely.
So, very good, man. Well, I know you have some on the horizon, and as I mentioned, I'm actually headed out tomorrow to the next conference and going and presenting on brand voice, which actually was one of our most heavily downloaded episodes when we discussed that. Gosh, it's hard to believe that was been a year and a half ago, Dan. But so yeah, lots happening out there. And speaking of AI and resourcing and internal utilization of it too, is I love the tool that we're utilizing now on the bankmarketingshow.com website. And really cool way for our listeners to go to our website. You'll see there where you can ask it a question or, seek some information there around a specific topic. And it's going to spit back a whole lot of resources and maybe an episode or two that we have covered on the podcast over the last 3 years that would be really helpful to you. So wanted to encourage folks to do that. Speaking of cool ways to use AI.
Yeah. Bankmarketingshow.com. And it's just a little bot window that comes up at the bottom. Feel free to give it a spin. It's pretty cool. It knows everything we've talked about on this show. So.
Yep. Well, we've had so many guests and more coming in the near future too that are so just such experts in the field in so many different areas. Really
Yep.
a great resource for our folks. So, well, very good. Well, Dan, look forward to both of us again spending some time on the road and coming back here and sharing more resources to our listeners.
Yeah, likewise.
Yep. Well, folks, please feel free to reach out to either one of us about some of the topics that we've covered today. Reach out to us through the bankmarketingshow.com website, and we look forward to future days with you.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for joining us. To go deeper or get access to some of the valuable nuggets from today's show, go to bankmarketingshow.com. There you'll find episodes, links to resources, and much more. Be sure to subscribe wherever you find your podcasts. And join us next time.